Broadcasting live from the chimney, this is The Monstrous Feminine, the podcast where horrible humans talk about horror. My name is Tyia, and I'm joined by my evil Santas,
Mila,
Louisa,
and Zeba.
And this is our second holiday special of the month. Before we get into it, go ahead and follow us on Spotify, YouTube, or the Apple Podcast app. You can find all of our links on our Instagram at The Monstrous Feminine Podcast.
This week we are covering the 2015 horror comedy Krampus, directed by Michael Dougherty. In Krampus, a young boy named Max becomes disillusioned with Christmas time when he notices that his immediate and extended family are extremely dysfunctional. To punish them for losing the Christmas spirit, Krampus, the demonic version of Santa from Alpine mythology, visits the household to pick them off one by one.
I knew St. Nicholas was not coming this year. Instead, it was a much darker, more ancient spirit. The shadow of St. Nicholas. It was Krampus.
This is basically the Polar Express, but like the dark version.
That's already pretty dark. That film freaks me the fuck out.
If I just got snatched by some people and they took me to meet Santa Claus and like drink some good ass hot chocolate, I would be fine.
Yeah, but not in that like Uncanny Valley type animation. I wouldn't like it.
Okay, so should we talk about the Krampus folklore? It originates in Alpine Germanic folklore, and he is this half demon, half goat.
He's Mr. Tomness?
No. He's like full goat. It's not like he's a centaur. Like he is a goat. He's just like a goat man.
Horned and...
Yeah, horned.
Okay.
Yeah, like picture like the devil. Picture the devil. So he and Saint Nick are like, and he's like the counterpart to Saint Nicholas. He's one of these Christmassy spirits.
They should have put him in that Rise of the Guardians movie.
I love that film.
I bet you like Jack Frost, didn't you?
Shut up.
I didn't like that call out.
Children, stop. So, he and Saint Nick visit children on the 5th of December, and Saint Nicholas rewards them if they're good, while Krampus punishes them if they're bad, often with birch rods, which is something you like whip people with in like the church.
He beats them with birch rods?
There is something called birch rods. Remember Metamorphosis? This is similar. Like what he whipped her with. That is like what we're thinking of here when we're talking about birch rods.
That would be enough motivation for me to not be bad, I gotta say.
Well, you know what? You're all going to be visited by Krampus because I can't even get through the description.
Okay, keep going.
Krampus comes from the German word Krampen, which means claw. In Alpine Austria and some parts of Germany, they still have this like day known as like Krampusnacht, which is Krampus night. But apparently adults on this night will dress up as Krampus to frighten the children in their homes.
I'm on board with that.
I don't like all this using Santa as a scare tactic.
It's not Santa. It's Krampus.
Well, or Krampus.
I guess like maybe this is like the joy of like believing in Santa, but like I again never really experienced that because I knew my mom was buying my Christmas present.
I don't think there's joy in believing in Krampus.
Yeah, I think I would rather not.
Yeah, but is this like saying if you don't believe in Santa, then he comes?
No. It's not necessarily linked. To be fair, it is linked to the Christmas spirit.
Krampus aside, I feel like, at least in my childhood, Santa was used as a threat. Like, every year, I would write Santa a letter, and then he'd write me a letter back being like, you barely made the good list. And here are a list of ways that you can improve next year to make sure you don't slip because you just got under the radar. I lived in fear from October to November because I had to catch up from all the bad things I had did.
I was going to ask you guys, would you be visited by Krampus or Santa when you were a kid? And clearly, you're a Krampus kid.
Mine is when I was like between the ages to like 5 to 7. I was pretty devilish.
Mila, would you have been visited by Krampus or
No,
Santa?
Santa, obviously.
Really?
Obviously, Mila is good. For this month's Witch of the Week, we are going to shout out people who had The Monstrous Feminine as their top podcast in their Spotify Wrapped. Our next few shoutouts go to Nia M. Hawk and Clarenzal. Thank you for listening to us. Many, many hours of our voices. Perhaps you listen to us just as much as we do.
Yeah, Niam Hawk streamed us for 1,531 minutes. God fucking bless. Oh, this is in Spanish. El podcast que más escuchaste fue The Monstrous Feminine. I think that's the podcast you listen to the most is The Monstrous Feminine. But I don't know that tense and I'm so sorry. Lo siento, that was bad.
Friendly reminder that we're also on Patreon. For £1 a month, you can gain access to our Discord. For £3 a month, you can hear uncut discussions from our main episodes. And for £5 a month, you get all that, plus a bonus episode. If you enjoy our podcast, please support us.
I may have, loosely watched this. I put this on and then proceeded to clean my house.
I struggled to focus. I was on my phone a lot.
This film was just not engaging because I feel like it wasn't enough of anything. I wanted it to kind of be more camp or something, but it simply wasn't. But it was kind of trying to be, and I was like, no, you need to commit. The Gremlins committed. You did not. So it doesn't have the same charm, which is interesting because in a Roger Ebert review, they were like...
This actually is pretty good review, shockingly.
Yeah, I know. This person who wrote this article was like, oh, I liked the fact that they were played in a relatively straight matter and it wasn't a campy approach. The actors also, he said, played it in quite a straight way. And this is something he liked about it. And I was just like, but that's something I didn't like about it. I thought it was not played that way. And B, it was not played that way enough. It should have gone full camp for me to find this entertaining, and it simply didn't.
I don't think I wanted camp from this movie. I think I wanted more art house. I wanted it to be weirder, but not in a campy way, but in I wanted the boy maybe not to take responsibility for bringing Krampus, because the reason why he did it anyway or tore up his letter because his family sucked. But in the end, he took all the responsibility and apologized, and then all the children were the ones who got the bulk of what happened to them. And even though they woke up and he was watching them through the bulb or whatever, it just felt very much the adults didn't have any responsibility. And I feel when you're a kid, most of the things that go on is out of your locus of control. Is very much a reaction to the way that your home life is, or the way that your parents treat you, or what you're lacking in parenting. So I felt it would have been nice if instead he actually kind of relished in the fact that his family was being punished for how they treated him, and his cousins made fun of him or everything, but he just in turn turned into this very apologetic figure who felt he had unleashed all of this on people who didn't deserve it. But in actuality, they did in a way. Maybe not for getting drugged to hell, because I think that was the implication of what was going on, but his family did ruin Christmas for him. And so if we're going by having the Christmas spirit and not being cruel, then it made sense. But I think one of the art housey horror concepts that I really like now is the horror of loneliness and feeling alone, and how that makes people react. And I feel they could have leaned into that a lot in this movie, and they just didn't. And so to me, it just didn't feel like a whole movie. It just felt something happening. It wasn't a bad movie, but it just didn't really hold my interest.
I was really disappointed. I thought I was going to love it. I think I was expecting it to be a lot funnier. And I think that there is actually pretty much zero humor in this film. It's funny in the way that all American films have that kind of weird slapsticky vibe to them. Okay, I'm going to take over Louisa's crazy train. Sorry to call it a crazy chain.
Yes.
Your anti-communist Gremlins masterpiece thesis. Okay, I was confused about the whole Krampus lore because they set it up to be through the German grandmother. It's if you lose hope, Krampus comes and you're punished for losing hope. But it's not necessarily about belief, and it's not about a childlike wonder. It's specifically about hope. Especially coming from a German grandmother, it makes me think there's some sort of wartime metaphors in that. And so I'm going to go on a crazy fucking rant here and say this film, if you take the way that loss of hope is presented negatively, if you swap that out for belief in a Christian God, I'm going to say this film is weird Christian propaganda.
Well, I think Christmas-themed anything, Christmas-themed media secularizes itself, right? Especially things that are aimed at children, I guess, but also stuff that's aimed for adults. So maybe you'll have a mention of a nativity or a mention of the Christmas story, and maybe that's central to it in some way, but they make it secular because you sort of have this message of Christmas is not about Jesus, Christmas is about giving, the spirit of hope.
And then the weird connection to the Germanic folklore. I don't know, it just seemed they threw these elements together, and then when you like add them all up, you're like, this film makes no sense.
Didn't they also lean into the German grandma or aunt in like that other movie, in the Christmas horror one? I guess they do that to like tie the folklore to it, but to be honest, like it feels a bit out of place. I kind of agree with Mila in the sense of like the way that it was sounding like her entire village got punished for being affected by war that they didn't do anything in.
American media around Christmas is like about this, like how grateful we should be, and like the reason Krampus is coming to punish this kid is because he's ungrateful, like he doesn't believe, and he's pissed at his family, and da 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 da. But like America came out of the war a little different than Germany. Like they had a reason to feel grateful. So I don't know.
Grandma is saying like what she's from World War II. In that case, this is a bit different, considering like this could have been like a village where there was a camp nearby, and they were all complacent. It could have been that she was a Hitler youth. I don't really get what they're getting at, because like in the case of the grandma, it highly depends on like how involved her city was in World War II, because depending on what they were doing, like maybe it was justified.
And the aunt mentions, she's like, what are you, a Jew? When she doesn't have ham for the dinner. To even include a German character, have a Jew comment, to make it about Christmas, and then to suggest that, like, you not believing in Santa, you're gonna go to hell?
I feel like maybe they should have just, like, not made it. Maybe just say, like, her family got displaced when they put up the Berlin Wall and everything, and they were on the east side, so they were living in squalor.
Yeah, they did not engage with the context at all.
I really struggle with Hollywood films that do that. There was like this period, and like I would say like up until about 2018, there was like this weird trope in horror films where they would like throw in World War II out of nowhere. Like there was a show on FX called The Strain, and it was like a vampire show, and all of a sudden it was like Nazis. And then there was that movie The Unborn, and it was like all of a sudden she was like, yeah, and this goes back to Nazis, and I was like, ugh.
The amount of times I had to, at least school in Britain, I had to study Nazi Germany over and over again. I think it's this distraction tactic because it's like the one war where like England looks good.
Yeah.
Y'all are really obsessed with wars.
Y'all are obsessed. Y'all will not leave like that post-war thing alone. Like you still eat like you're in the war, and I cannot account for it. It seems like your history curriculum is like the Tudors, and then like some mysterious thing where England did some things. You completely skip colonization, and then it's just the world wars back to back over and over. Now I think it's just so ingrained in everybody that like, yeah, World War II happened, throw that in there. Like it literally feels like they just seasoned it with like references that they weren't about to connect. I would categorize this as a slapstick, but like I think they also wanted it to be scary, and they thought for it to be scary, there has to be something serious also about it, and I don't think that that is the case.
There's something very uncomfortable about using, like, actual traumatic events in horror. Like, that just shouldn't be done.
I think there's a line.
They should have just thought about a lot of things before they made this movie, because they're, like, using it as, like, the grandma being like, everything, all these terrible things happened to my village that I lived in Germany during World War II.
I mean, we've talked about, just going to the point of, like, there's a line and what should we make horror about. We have mentioned it in other episodes talking about like black horror in the sense of like if it's like very overt and real and happening, it does not translate well to horror and that sort of unconscious fear portrayal of like supernatural, oogie boogie spooky, because it's like no, it's real, and this is like weird that you're portraying it that way when you could just make like a historical drama and it will be equally horrific, if that makes sense. But also with this film in general, with the comedy, I really couldn't tell if it was mocking or criticizing, or mocking to criticize, or just mocking to make funny out of whatever it is, particularly with the uncle. Like, are we making fun of guns or are we pro guns? Are we making fun of the nagging housewife woman and being like sexist, or are we commenting on that, on like everyone's treatment of the mom like that? I couldn't tell, and I feel like with comedies, like if they're funny, then you can tell.
In that way, this film felt really dated. Like I thought this was like it felt like an early 2000s type of comedy in the way that it was like so disconnected and so like unaware of itself in certain parts. But then this is also, I think, where horror and comedy have their like sweet overlap. Like I believe everything is on the table to make a horror about, or everything is on the table to make a joke about, if you do it with tact, right? Like I'm like, it's rarely like the topic at hand. Like I've seen it done well, I've also seen it done badly, and I think it's the same thing in a comedy where it's like, yeah, you can make a joke about that, but I didn't think this movie was that funny. And in the same way where it's like, yeah, you can make a horror about sensitive topics, but it's got to be really well done. Like, I don't think I would say there's anything that should be like completely off the table in your art, but I think like they're super similar genres in that way, and especially so when they overlap.
I mean, we don't hear much from like Toni Collette's family about their political views, but the cousins and the sister, they're like made out to be this sort of right-wing, pro-gun, racist type family. But they made like so many fat jokes, and they like equated a lot of their like unlikability to them being like really greedy and lazy. I know this is a very American stereotype.
I feel like comedy in general is so fat phobic.
Comedy in general, yeah, you're right.
I was just listening to a podcast about this, like a media studies podcast about like anti-fatness in American media and American comedy specifically. I guess in like sitcom kind of comedy is what they were mostly focusing on, but it's like looked at as like something you would really be afraid of happening to you, or like a moral failing, like that greed point of like. And they also talked about like, you know, in like the Michelle Obama time of like, we're gonna fight obesity, like childhood obesity in America is like blah 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 blah. Like it was not looked at as like, you know, even like a class thing. We're really just looking out for your health. Like it's not us being like fat phobic, it's we're really looking out for you.
Yeah, which is why this film's kind of extra problematic, because they have also copious references to that family in particular being like working class and like not having as much money. So it's kind of like to throw in like fat jokes or lazy jokes or whatever is also indirectly being like, this is why you're poor too.
Yeah, you're poor because you're lazy, and you're fat because you're lazy.
Mila, I guess maybe this goes back to your Christianity point, because I think sometimes the reason why there's so much of like anti-fatness in the media is because glutton is considered to be one of the 7 deadly sins, and so people just kind of lump it with that as like something that's a deadly sin, that's immoral, because it goes with like greed and excess and taking so other people can't have, kind of all like lumps into like this puritanism of culture.
Thank you for listening to The Monstrous Feminine. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, SoundCloud, and Spotify at The Monstrous Feminine Podcast, and on Twitter at The MonFemPod. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, and follow us on TikTok at The Monstrous Feminine Pod. Brooms up, witches out.